Ronell Foster was riding his bicycle through the hushed streets of Vallejo, Calif., one evening when a police officer noticed that the bike had no lights and that he was weaving in and out of traffic. The officer, Ryan McMahon, went after Foster with lights flashing, siren blaring and the car's spotlight pointed directly at him. Foster stopped. The pair exchanged words before Foster, who was on community supervision for a car theft conviction a month earlier, fled, eventually ditching the bicycle. McMahon caught up with Foster and jumped on top of him. The two struggled. McMahon, a rookie on the force, tasered the father of two and struck him several times with his department-issued flashlight. Gunfire erupted, 7 shots total. When it was over, Foster, 33, lay dying in the bushes in a darkened courtyard near an apartment complex. Solano County District Attorney Krishna Abrams declined to bring charges against McMahon, who is white, saying the February 2018 fatal shooting of Foster, who is black and unarmed, was justified. In a January 31, 2020 letter to the Vallejo police chief, Abrams said that Foster posed an immediate and extreme threat to McMahon, and that it was objectively reasonable for Officer McMahon to defend himself and open fire on Foster. Article continues. After sponsor message, Ronell Foster was fatally shot by Vallejo, CA police officer Ryan McMahon in 2018 after being stopped for riding his bicycle without a light. Foster was unarmed. Foster family. A year later, he shot again. This time, the victim was aspiring black rapper Willie McCoy, who was asleep in his silver Mercedes CLS 500 outside a Taco Bell shortly before 11 p.m. on February 9, 2019. An employee called 911 to report that McCoy was slumped over the steering wheel and blocking the drive-thru. When McMahon and other officers arrived, 6 in all, one of them spotted a semi-automatic pistol in McCoy's lap. As McCoy slowly awoke, he moved his hand to scratch his chest. According to a report by an expert the city hired to review the shooting, cops believed he was reaching for the gun, so they fired 55 shots in 3.5 seconds. McMahon said he fired after believing that the officers and residents were in imminent danger. Officials cleared him for his role in that killing too, but he was fired last September for violating department policy during the shooting by engaging in unsafe conduct and neglect for basic firearm safety, a department official said. "It's a very sad situation," McMahon said in a brief interview with NPR. "It's something I'm still dealing with. It hasn't gone away." The deadly shooting of unarmed black men and women by police officers in the U.S. has increasingly garnered worldwide attention over the last few years. The 2014 killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, sparked a week of protests that catapulted the Black Lives Matter movement into the national spotlight. Since then, tens of thousands of people across the country have taken to the streets to protest police brutality of blacks by mostly white officers. Article continues. After sponsor message since 2015, police officers have fatally shot at least 135 unarmed black men and women nationwide, an NPR investigation has found. NPR reviewed police court and other records to examine the details of the cases. At least 75% of the officers were white. The latest one happened earlier this month in Killeen, Texas, when Patrick Warren Sr., 52, was fatally shot by an officer responding to a mental health call. For at least 15 of the officers, like McMahon, the shootings were not their first or their last, NPR found. They have been involved in 2, sometimes 3 or more, shootings, often deadly and without consequences. Those who study deadly force by police say it's unusual for officers to be involved in any shootings. Many officers will go their entire career without shooting, sometimes without pulling their gun out at all, said Peter Scharf, a criminologist and professor in the School of Public Health at Louisiana State University and author of The Badge and the Bullet: Police Use of Deadly Force. It's rare. Not every law enforcement agency releases detailed information about police shootings. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the Kansas City Police Department, for example, refused to release specifics such as officer names or their race, citing open investigations. Still, NPR reviewed thousands of pages of job applications, personnel records, use of force reports, citizen complaints, court records, lawsuits, news releases, witness statements, and local and state police investigative reports to examine the backgrounds of the officers and analyze details of each shooting. We also interviewed use of force experts, criminologists, police, lawyers, prosecutors, and relatives of victims. Among NPR's other findings, at least 6 officers had troubled pasts before being hired onto police departments, including drug use and domestic violence. 1 officer had been fired from another law enforcement agency, and at least 2 others were forced out. Several officers were convicted of crimes while on the force, such as battery and resisting and obstructing, but kept their jobs. In one instance, officials in a tiny Louisiana parish repeatedly fired and rehired a deputy who got into trouble with the law 3 times over 30 years, records show. More than 24 officers have racked up citizen complaints or use of force incidents. A Fort Lauderdale police officer had 82 reviews for use of force incidents but was never found in violation. A Vineland, New Jersey officer had more than 36 use of force incidents over a 5-year period. Several officers have violated their department policies and been cited for ethics violations, including a Hollywood, Florida officer accused of trying to steer business to his company, and an Arizona state trooper accused of misuse of state property. 19 of the officers involved in deadly shootings were rookies with less than a year on the force. 1 was on the job for 4 hours, another for 4 days. More than a quarter of the killings occurred during traffic stops, and 24 of the dead, 18%, suffered from mental illness. The youngest person shot was a 15-year-old Balch Springs, Texas high school freshman who played on the football team. The oldest was a 62-year-old man killed in his Los Angeles County home. Nearly 60% of the shootings occurred in the South, with more than a quarter in Texas, Georgia, and Louisiana, NPR found. The killings have led to at least 30 judgments and settlements totaling more than $142 million, records show. Dozens of lawsuits and claims are pending. Charmaine Edwards left speaks to supporters during a protest outside a courthouse in Dallas in 2017. Jordan Edwards was a 15-year-old in Balch Springs, Texas when he was shot and killed by police. L.M. Otero, AP. An examination of individual cases reveals the myriad ways that law enforcement agencies fail to hold officers accountable and allow them to be in a position to shoot again. In many instances, the criminal justice system refuses to prosecute, often resulting in departments putting officers back on the street instead of desk jobs where they have little contact with the public. Other times, police unions protect officers from accountability. And sometimes, departments are so desperate to recruit officers that they ignore warning signs such as an officer's troubled past and hire them anyway. Why do they get passes on killing people? Asked Paula McGowan, Foster's mother. If the system was right, they would hold these people accountable. Unnecessary and unreasonable. Nathaniel Pickett, too, was walking back to his $18 a night room at the El Rancho, a seen better days bungalow motel along historic Route 66 in Barstow, California. It was shortly after 9 p.m. on November 19, 2015, and Nate, as his family called him, often took evening walks. As the 29-year-old former engineering student crossed the street, he caught the eye of Kyle Woods, a San Bernardino sheriff's deputy. Woods made a U-turn into the motel parking lot, jumped out of his cruiser and approached Pickett, police records show. He demanded Pickett's name and birth date. Pickett complied. In fact, he did everything Woods asked of him, including taking his hands out of his pockets. When Woods asked him if he lived at the motel and where he was from, Pickett said he didn't know. When Pickett asked if he had done something wrong, the deputy said he just wanted to talk to him. "What's the problem?" Pickett asked Woods 9 different times as the deputy peppered him with questions about whether he had ever been arrested, yes, if he had lived in Barstow all of his life, and where he was going. "There is no problem," Woods responded. Pickett asked if he could go to his room where he had lived since moving to Barstow 7 weeks earlier. Woods would later admit under oath that he knew he had no probable cause to arrest him and that Pickett had the right to walk away. But when he tried, Woods grabbed him and told him to stop resisting. Woods threatened to tase him. Pickett put his arms up and was running toward his room, room 45, when he tripped and fell in the breezeway. As he scooted backward from Woods, the deputy caught him. The two scuffled while a male citizen volunteer on patrol with Woods watched from a few feet away. Woods punched Pickett 15 to 20 times before pulling out his service weapon and threatening to shoot him. He fired, hitting Pickett twice in the chest, once with the barrel of the gun pressed against the man's chest. Nathaniel Pickett, 2, right, who suffered from mental illness, was shot to death by a San Bernardino County, California, sheriff's deputy in 2015 after he was stopped while walking to the motel where he lived. Pickett was unarmed. His father, left, and mother sued the county and were awarded $33.5 million. Nathaniel Pickett Sr. Pickett moaned. One of the bullets pierced his heart and left lung. Pickett was pronounced dead at the scene. Woods, on the force for 2 years at the time but on the street for just a few months, said he shot him because he feared for his life. Woods, who is black, didn't give a statement to police about the incident for 28 days. And when he did, he said that he stopped Pickett after seeing him hop the motel fence. He thought Pickett was trespassing, and he was fidgety, like he might be under the influence, Woods said. Pickett had marijuana in his system and his blood alcohol level was 0.01%, far below the level to be considered legally impaired, records show. The deputy never faced criminal charges for Pickett's death, but the victim's family filed civil charges. And when he testified under oath at the civil trial, Woods told a different story. He said he never saw Pickett jump over the fence and that the gate actually was open. He also said it never occurred to him that Pickett could be mentally ill. Pickett was diagnosed with mental illness during his freshman year at Hampton University in Virginia and had been treated through the mental health court in San Bernardino in 2012 after a conviction for resisting a peace officer and false personation, records show. Scott Defoe, who spent 2 decades with the Los Angeles Police Department, testified as an expert witness at the civil trial. He said that Woods's use of force was unnecessary and unreasonable. "This is probably one of the worst cases I have looked at because of the mental health component," Defoe testified. "There was no crime. He ran as he had a lawful right to do." The jury in the civil trial was unanimous. They agreed that Woods had no right to detain Pickett, used unreasonable or excessive force against him, which caused his death, and delayed getting him medical care. They awarded Pickett's family $33.5 million, one of the largest amounts ever awarded in an officer-involved shooting case.